Imagine this, a world where aging is a choice, death is just a technical glitch, and you could live not just decades, but centuries, or even forever. Sounds like science fiction, right? Well, Joe Rogan has dived deep into this idea with some of the most brilliant minds in science and technology. From groundbreaking research to philosophical debates, Joe's take on immortality might just blow your mind. But here's the kicker. What if living forever isn't all it's cracked up to be? Joe Rogan said, do we really want to live forever? What happens when there's no end in sight? Are we even built for that? Chapter 1, The Science Behind Immortality. Let's start with the science. Joe Rogan has spoken at length with experts like David Sinclair, the Harvard researcher known for his groundbreaking work on aging.
Aging is a disease, or maybe perhaps should be treated as a disease or classified?
Oh, I absolutely think aging should be classified as a disease. We should think of it as a disease. Why shouldn't we? Everything else that goes on in the body over time that's bad for us.
Sinclair believes aging is not inevitable. It's a disease, and like any disease, it can be treated, slowed, or even cured. Joe's fascination with this concept comes from a very human place. He often marvels at the idea that we could hack the biological processes that make us age. David Sinclair explains that the aging process boils down to damage at the cellular level. Over time, our DNA accumulates errors, like scratches on a CD or glitches in a computer program. By repairing those errors, scientists believe we can essentially stop or even reverse aging. One of the most exciting areas of research is in molecules like NAD+ and sirtuins, which help regulate how our cells age. These breakthroughs could one day mean that humans live to be 150 or even 200 years old in full health. Imagine being 80, but feeling and moving like you're 25. It's not just a dream anymore, it's a possibility. But here's where it gets controversial. Rogan often challenges his guests with tough questions. Sure, we can extend life, but are we solving the real problem? For instance, if we live longer, will we have the quality of life to match? Will our minds stay sharp as our bodies stay young? Chapter 2, The Quest to Defeat Death and Its Consequences. The quest for immortality is as old as humanity itself. Ancient civilizations dreamed of elixirs of life, and modern scientists dream of molecular solutions. But Joe Rogan isn't afraid to ask, why are we so obsessed with cheating death? During one of his conversations, Joe explored the emotional side of this pursuit. He reflected on how deeply the fear of death is embedded in human psychology. Death is the great unknown, and that terrifies us. But does that mean we should run from it? Joe talked about how many of our greatest accomplishments, our art, our relationships, even our motivation to live life fully, stem from the knowledge that it all ends. If you knew you were going to live forever, Joe asks, would you take the same risks? Would you love the same way? Would you even get out of bed? This hits at the heart of what makes us human. Mortality gives our lives urgency. Without it, would life lose its meaning? Chapter 3, The Psychological Toll of Immortality. Rogan often dives into the psychological toll that immortality could bring.
I think being an immortal, living forever, would be one of the most depressing things, particularly if everybody else was dying around you.
In one memorable podcast, he posed this question: what happens to your mind when there's no expiration date? Think about it. We already see how people struggle with long lives in old age. Depression, loneliness, and even existential dread are common. Now imagine multiplying that over centuries. Would your mind adapt to an endless life? Or would it crumble under the weight of infinite time? Rogan has explored how immortality could fundamentally change our perception of time. With no end in sight, would you still feel the joy of small moments? Or would life become monotonous and dull? And then there's the darker side. Imagine outliving everyone you love, your parents, your siblings, your children, all gone while you remain. Joe reflected on this deeply in one podcast. Would I want to live forever if it meant watching everyone I care about disappear? I don't know if I could handle that. Chapter 4, The Ethics of Immortality. Joe Rogan often shifts gears to tackle the ethical implications of living forever. In one particularly intense discussion, he asked, who gets to live forever? Who decides? Let's be real, immortality won't be cheap. The technology required to extend human life will likely be available only to the ultra-wealthy. at least at first. Joe has expressed his concerns about this. If only the rich can afford it, doesn't that create an even bigger divide between the haves and the have-nots? And it's not just about money. Overpopulation is another massive issue. If no one dies, where do we put everyone? How do we feed billions of people in a world that's already struggling with limited resources? One of Rogan's guests suggested an even scarier possibility: societal stagnation. Imagine a world where the same leaders, the same corporations, and the same systems persist forever. Without new generations to challenge the old, would humanity stop evolving? Chapter 5: The Role of Technology in Immortality. Technology plays a massive role in Rogan's conversations about immortality. Some scientists believe that instead of keeping our biological bodies alive forever, we could upload our consciousness into machines. Imagine a digital version of yourself existing in the cloud, free from physical limitations. Joe finds this idea both fascinating and horrifying. What even is consciousness, he asks. If you upload your brain into a machine, is that really you or just a copy? This opens up an even bigger debate. If we tamper with our consciousness, could we lose the very essence of what makes us human? Joe often reflects on how little we truly understand about the mind and soul. We're playing with fire, he warns. Chapter 6: The Hope and the Fear of Living Forever. Despite the challenges, Rogan sees hope in the pursuit of immortality. Imagine curing diseases, ending suffering, and preserving the knowledge of the greatest minds in history. There's no denying the potential for progress, but Rogan doesn't shy away from the fear. What if immortality isn't a gift but a curse? The idea of living forever might seem appealing, but as Joe often points out, the reality could be much darker than we imagine. So what do you think? Would you choose immortality if it were possible? Or is the idea of an eternal life more of a curse than a blessing? Joe Rogan might not have all the answers, but he sure knows how to ask the questions that make you think. And at the end of the day, maybe that's what matters most.